Please welcome Bradley Marsh, shareholder at Greenberg Traurig.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure today to introduce our keynote speaker, Rudy Giuliani. Rudy Giuliani served as mayor of New York City from 1994 to 2001. Many of you know him from his strong leadership and iconic presence in the aftermath of the World Trade Center attacks. Indeed, that was the first time that I came to know of Rudy Giuliani. But if you lived in New York, you knew well before then about the greatness of Rudy Giuliani. He was a bipartisan leader in New York and had many great achievements, including working with labor to restructure city operations that ultimately resulted in an extreme decline in violent crime. And he revitalized the city of New York for families and others to make it a place that thrived again. This, combined with his poise and leadership, earned him the fond title of America's mayor. But before all of that, he was also an accomplished attorney. Rudy Giuliani was the number 3 attorney at the Department of Justice. He was also the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, and even litigated here in San Francisco for Levi Strauss at one point. But now he's my partner at Greenberg Traurig and the head of our firm's cybersecurity, privacy, and crisis management practices. And GT was a natural fit, of course, for Rudy Giuliani. Our firm has an extremely large footprint. It's one of the largest firms in the world by attorney count. A great depth of practice and specialties, and also a great history with different types of political histories. For example, and we have hundreds of elected and former elected officials at our firm, on the East Coast, we boast Vicki Kennedy and, of course, Rudy Giuliani among them. And on this coast, we boast the former Speaker of the Assembly, Darrell Steinberg, and San Francisco's very own Supervisor Leslie Katz. And then in the middle, we have plenty more. Most recently, Governor Bill Owens in Denver. And we do all this in an effort to deliver the best results for our client. We're proud to have him on our team. And without any more, I'd like to introduce you. It is my pleasure to introduce you to my partner, Rudolph W. Giuliani.
Thank you very much. It's very nice to be in San Francisco, and I love your campaign slogan, bigger, better, bolder. That'd make a good presidential campaign slogan. When I ran for mayor of New York City in 1993, my first term, I had a city that was the crime capital of America. I remember being here earlier about the statistics about people who wanted to live here and didn't want to live here and wanted to leave. Well, New York City at the time was averaging about 2,000 murders a year. We had 1.1 million people on welfare in a population of about 7.3 million. We had a 10.5% unemployment rate. We had a $2.3 billion deficit. And we were on the cover of Time magazine with this big characterization of a big apple rotting. And it said, the title of the article was, "The Rotting Apple." So my slogan when I ran for mayor was, "You can't do any worse." I should have thought of that. But 8 years later, even with the disaster of September 11, when I first came in, 75% of the people of New York City would have preferred to live somewhere else if they could. And by the time I left, it was just the opposite. 75% of the people, 80%, wanted to stay in New York and found it a much different place. And A lot of that involved the reduction in crime, increase in employment, the reduction in welfare. We took 600,000 people off the welfare rolls, 500,000 people with jobs, 100,000 people we sent to New Jersey. And at the core of a lot of our success, believe it or not, was technology, which most people don't know. I mean, they know about the broken windows theory, and they know about a lot of the programs that we use, the programs for domestic violence and for drug trafficking and for organized crime. But they don't know that the core of all of it was something called the ComStat program. We had no better way of describing it than the ComStat stood for computer program. And it measured crime every single day in every part of the city. It became enormously sophisticated. We reviewed it every Thursday without fail, pin mapped it, was able to see where the crimes took place, what kinds of crimes, where our police were located, why crime was going up in one place but not another. And it changed over a period of 8 years. It changed our police force from being a reactive to a proactive police force. Rather than just reacting to a report of crime, we started to be able, from the statistics and the real-time information about crime that only technology made available to us, we were able to be predictive. So that crime went down during the time we used ComStat. During my administration, 60%, and then during Michael Bloomberg's, another 10, 20%. We actually all told about 83%. 86% decline in homicide. We went from the 2,000 murders to 340. Wouldn't have happened 10 years earlier without the technology. I can tell you the same story about the reduction in welfare. It was driven largely by technology, by helping to find jobs for people, by measuring the success of our welfare workers in finding jobs, by tracking the jobs and giving them bonuses if they found jobs for people, and better bonuses if they found better jobs. Again, couldn't have done that without computer technology. So I'm a very big advocate of that. And I also am a big fan of cities. I love cities. I think cities define countries more than countries define cities. I don't know, when you think of France, you think of Paris. When you think of Italy, you think of Rome. When you think of California, you think of San Francisco. Some people think of Los Angeles. I think of San Francisco. Los Angeles is... No. And I'm not running for anything here, but Los Angeles is too sprawling for me. I like cities like Boston, although I don't like the Red Sox. I like cities like Boston. I like cities like Boston, Philadelphia, New York, Chicago, San Francisco. You know, you're a big sprawling 8 counties, 9 counties, but you have a core. You got a center, a place to come to, and now you're the cyber capital of the world, the technology capital of the world. New York is the capital of the world, but you're the cyber capital of the world. I overlapped for 7 years with Bill Clinton, and I would always tell him, just to needle him, that it really must be nice to be living in the capital of the United States, but it really is better to live in the capital of the world. All of the things that kind of brought you here are things about your city that still exist. You're the cyber capital, but you're also a beautiful city to be in. You're a city that has tremendous tourism. You've got tremendous restaurants. You've got enormously creative people, great universities. So this is a city that, for example, to a lot of Asia defines America the way New York defines America to a lot of people in Europe and Asia, and they know a lot more about us than they do about that whole vast country in between us. Probably that's not all that good an idea, and It probably gives them a lot of misconceptions about what America is like, but that's just reality. And it's been reality since the beginning of history, right? I mean, Athens and Rome and London and Paris, and you just go back and look at it. So what you're doing with this council is really important, understanding the importance of San Francisco as a beacon, and then everything that has grown around it. And for better or worse, you've become the place where many of our innovations have taken place that make it possible for us to do things. I described two of them that happened years ago for me that couldn't be done, in the past. And there are so many more things to do. So when I left being mayor, I understood, even though I began with no understanding of it all, but 26 of my agencies I had on computer programs where I set metrics, set measures of success. I sort of had a concept of government that the thing that's wrong with government is we don't measure success. In business, we have to measure success because we have something called profit and loss. And if the loss is too much, the business is gone. So you have to measure success. And you've got to look at, are you making money? In government, you don't have that. A transportation department, how do you measure, what's the success of a transportation department? What's the success of a police department? Is it arresting people? No, it's protecting society. It's bringing crime down. What's the success of a welfare agency? Well, I made the success of a welfare agency trying to keep people off welfare rather than putting people on welfare. And then I set up metrics that led in that direction. So when I left being mayor, before I went back to being a lawyer again, I spent 5 years as a consultant, a security consultant. And one of the things I did is devise security programs for governments and for businesses. And I became, back in 2002, 2003, very concerned about cyber security. Because even back then, I realized that our technological advances were way, way ahead of the security we were providing for those technological advances. So let's just think for a moment about a bank. In the old days, the old Wells Fargo days, so they had a big safe, and everything that was important went into that safe, right? The cash and the gold, and they had lock boxes for your valuables, and they put it behind these gigantic iron gates, and they had police officers or retired police officers with guns that guarded that and guarded the tellers, and lawyers locked things in safes, the attorney-client privilege information. Pharmaceutical companies took the security of their tests and their testing and their research and development very, very seriously and kept it under guard, physical guard, or again in safes. We never had perfect security. People robbed banks. People broke into safes. People always had the problem of inside corruption, where somebody might give away for all the guarding you were doing, all the safety you were providing, you might have a rotten employee who was giving the information away. That always existed, so the fact that that now exists in the cyber world is not unusual. It's not unusual that some of the major breaches that we've had have come from the inside. That's no different than the embezzlements of 40 years ago that came from the inside. But what we hadn't figured out was that all this information that we were guarding in safes, gosh, it was up in the cloud. I mean, all that money is up in a cloud now. And all that very, very sensitive information about your social security number and your date of birth and your health records and on and on and on and on and on that we used to guard so carefully is now sitting out there, sitting in the cloud or being transmitted for a period of time so that it's open to people to look at it, to grab it, to take it, to steal it, and to rob it. Now, I don't know, I've done a lot of different things in my life. I won't tell you the bad ones. I was once asked in a presidential debate by George Stephanopoulos at the end of the debate, and I suffered the difficulty of being the leading candidate for a fairly long period of time. So you always get the nastiest questions, something I try to explain to Donald Trump. It just goes with the territory. So at the end of this debate, and it was on a Sunday morning in Iowa, he said to me, "Mayor Giuliani, what's the worst thing that you did in your life?" Imagine asking you that. And I was actually starting to think, what was the worst thing I ever did in my life? You know what I said to him? I said, "George, you know, it's Sunday morning, and I would prefer to confess that to your father, a priest." He just shut up. And then he called me about 6 hours later and said, "You ruined my day." Because all these people call me and want to know, how is my father a priest? Am I an illegitimate child or something? Well, if you don't know what I do, George is a Greek Orthodox, and his father is the deacon, or he's a priest, and he runs the cathedral, the Greek cathedral in New York. And I knew George's father very, very well. I never did go to confession to him, but I've spent, if I could describe what is my biggest passion, in addition to being a lawyer, it's fighting crime. I don't know where it comes from or why it is, but maybe it was my training in law school. Maybe it was the judge that I was a law clerk for, who was a tremendous trial lawyer and prosecutor, and put Frank Costello, who was the leader of the mafia, in jail when he was a young lawyer, and argued the Rosenberg case in the Court of Appeals and fought the major crime problems of his day. And then I began my career very, very young, at 23 years old, as an assistant U.S. attorney. So fighting crime has always been a passion of mine. And then I was the third-ranking official in the Justice Department. And I always tried to focus on and think about, well, what are the biggest crimes that we're not dealing with? And organized crime was one back in the late 70s and early 80s. And I spent a long time devising the program that we used to bring down the mafia. It was inspired by Joe Bonanno's book, actually. Thank you, Joe, for inspiring it. I had the honor of putting him in jail. And I devised a theory of how we were going to investigate them and how we were going to crush them. And it involved getting the FBI to give me some of their counterintelligence agents so that we could break into their homes, offices, cars, put in bugs, and put in video equipment. I have great video that, like The Godfather's for real. And ultimately put probably between Italy and America 2,000 mafia people in jail, including the heads of all of the families, and attacked the Teamsters Union and took out the board, put in trustees, and took organized crime out of the Teamsters Union, out of the carting industry, out of the Fulton Fish Market. Used to get attacked by Italian-American groups for being anti-Italian. It was really great because I'm like a really crazy Goomba, but that was my passion. Then Colombian cartels, Colombian cartel owners, the guys who ran the FARC. I've had three serious threats in my life. When I first was U.S. attorney, the Sicilian Mafia offered $800,000 to have me killed. We caught the people who did it. That went away. toward the end of my time as U.S. Attorney, one of the heads of the 5 families who was in jail for 100 years offered a contract of $400,000 to kill me. Extremely embarrassing. And because I do a great deal of work now in South America reducing crime, the FARC has put out a contract to slit my throat, but for no disclosed amount of money. So I don't know. I hope it's more than $800,000. But that never stopped me. And white-collar crime, I was the first to really bring major white-collar crime cases. Ivan Boesky and Michael Milken, and if you've watched Wall Street 1, that's the good Wall Street movie, because I'm in it. I did that, and when I became mayor of New York, as I said, I was elected for only one reason, and that is to fight crime. They never would have elected me at any other time. It's only the 3rd Republican elected mayor of New York City in 100 years, and I was only one of 2 that remained a Republican. We are an endangered species in New York City. We should be entitled to the same protections as the plover and some of those other animals that are protected. We should be protected, just in order to have a 2-party system, you know. Right now, and for some time, going back to 2000, but certainly now, the largest form of crime in the United States and in the world, I was just in Mexico. Cyber theft went up in Mexico. They think of Mexico as shootings and killings, and sure, that's true, but cybercrime in Mexico went up 40% last year. 40%. Cybercrime is the single largest growing form of crime in the United States, according to James Comey, the head of the FBI, who was one of my former assistants, who I am very proud of. And it has tremendous implications. It has tremendous implications because it can interfere with, in a very, very important way, with the developments and the things that we can do with modern technology. I'll give you an example. It would, of course, be enormously valuable if every single one of us had on our smartphone or a card that had our entire medical history in it. So that if, God forbid, one of us had a heart attack right now, who wasn't from San Francisco, like me, let's say, and you were taken to the hospital, when I entered the emergency room, I wouldn't be a stranger to the ER doctor, who's got to figure out what happened to this guy. Does he have epilepsy? Does he have diabetes? Is this a heart attack? He would know everything about me that my doctor at Mount Sinai Hospital, Valentin Fuster, knows about me, who takes care of me. And he'd be able to communicate with him. So what holds us back from doing that? People are afraid. They're afraid that with all the hacking that goes on and all the identity thefts, and my God, they took all the background checks of the people seeking government jobs for a 10-year period from the federal government. Can you imagine that? I mean, I don't know why we're not more shocked by that. I read in my lifetime as a Justice Department official probably 2,000 background checks. They contain very, very sensitive information. And these are background checks for the people who were hired and the people who weren't hired, which means there's something in that background check you don't want somebody to know, and for which you can be extorted, for which you surely can be embarrassed and possibly have to get divorced. I remember a lot of them. I mean, I remember there was sort of a common thread that ran through some of them. But even that hasn't awakened us to that, how important this is. It's holding back what we can do in healthcare. It's holding back what we can do commercially. It's holding back solutions to some of our social problems that, as I explained to you, with welfare and crime and other things, you could do it even at a higher level and even much better now than we were able to do with I mean, the computers we were using in 1994 and 95 and 96 and 97 weren't anywhere near as powerful as my phone. So you can imagine what you can do now, but this whole cyber explosion, revolution, is going to be held back by the amount of crime that we allow to take place. Not to mention the national security implications of it, which are equally as severe. Another quote of Jim Comey's is, there are two types of corporations in America. Those that have been hacked by the Chinese and know it, and those that have been hacked by the Chinese and don't know it, and are going to find out about it at some point. So it's really imperative that we pay as much attention to cybersecurity as we do the new developments, that there be an equal amount of effort put into it, and that we invest the money in doing the best we can to create, the cyber safe and the cyber police officers and all the things we used to have when we protected important information. So I'll give you 5 things I think at least we have to do in order to protect ourselves. I think any company of any size has to have independent cybersecurity experts beyond just the people who are their own experts who review internally on a constant basis to make sure that you haven't been penetrated, to start to catalog and start to analyze those who are seeking to try to get in to see if you can discern patterns. You can't leave it just to the people that are working inside the company. They become too used to their methods. They become too used to one way of doing it. Also, if you keep up the same defense for too long, they're going to figure it out. You got to change in material ways the way you're protecting yourself on a somewhat regular basis if you want to stay ahead of them. And you only do that if you get the benefit of outsiders with independent knowledge, independent analysis, and not locked into the way you have been doing it. Number 2, I am a very big believer in attack and penetration. I started an attack and penetration company in 2003. I had to sell it in 2006 or 2007 because I was running for president and my clients didn't want to get listed. No, because back then, if you were listed as having a cybersecurity expert, that was a bad mark against you. I mean, that was, well, why would you need one? Now you want to list 500 of them if you can. But back then it was a different thing. And I believe a lot in attack and penetration because no matter how much your people on the inside and your experts on the inside, there are still things you're going to miss. Some of the best companies that do the work on the inside will assure you a 50 or 60% rate of detection, which is why you have to do attack and penetration, because you can start to get that percentage up. Third, you need to work with a company, or you need a company that works with these companies that knows how to investigate cyber crime, so that you can start to discern patterns, so you can start to figure out where are your areas of weakness, who's coming at you, why? Is it coming from China? Is it coming from a certain type of customer? I'll tell you a case that I went through last year, and it was a very wealthy family, and somebody had hacked into their account at a very, very prominent bank, and they were in the wealth management section of that bank, and they moved millions of dollars through because they had the Social Security numbers of the 2 heads of the family. And it was happening from Russia. We were able to figure that out. So immediately we started investigating in Russia. And as we were doing that, one of our very smart investigators saw one of the hacks. And take a long story and get it down to the end result, had nothing to do with the Russians hacking the family. 2 of the younger members of the family were concerned that they weren't getting their fair share of the trust. This is true. And the 2 of them together figured out how to hack into the family's records. got them all, came to the conclusion that they were getting more than they thought they were. That the money was going to, in other words, they were like 23, 24. By the time they became 28, they were going to get really a lot of money. And they were very happy, but some Russian hacker got them. And by getting them, got all the information about their uncles and their grandfather, and realized what he had. And he didn't take a penny of their money. He used them in order to launder drug money and illegal arms sales money through their account, about $12 to $15 million worth of it, because their account, it would not be unusual for that kind of money to move through their account. So there are numerous reasons why hacking is going on. Setting up phony Social Security accounts, setting up phony student loans, getting tax returns. That has happened to many people. Getting tax returns filed before you file yours and getting a refund, taking out loans in general, embezzlement, and laundering money, to name just a few. And that's why you need an investigatory arm that can start to narrow down what would be the purpose of hacking you. Like in the case of Target, nobody was seeking secrets of Target. If somebody hacked Pfizer, they might be seeking secrets of Pfizer, right? They were hacking Target just to get identities and go sell them on the dark web. Go sell them to the people who, and now it's become like organized crime, the people who specialize in setting up phony student loans, the people who specialize in setting up phony home loans, the people who specialize in phony Social Security accounts. The people there, and if you go on the dark web, I don't suggest it, but if you have the right credentials and it's a reputable investigatory organization, they can get on it. You can see a lot of that activity. It's almost like an auction. I got all these names in the 18 to 22-year-old category, and these groups will bid for it. Or I have all these names in the 63 to 66-year-old category. Or I have all these names of high wealth individuals, and you can sell them for huge amounts of money. And that's why an investigatory firm is so important. You also need to have something that many companies overlook: identity protection. When I analyze cybersecurity, from a perspective of a whole company, I always ask the executives, does your secretary or your assistant have identity protection? And very often the answer is no. Well, your secretary or assistant has most of the information that you have. And protecting you is not good enough. You got to protect them. And they need identity protection. So if their Social Security numbers and their relative information start to show up on the dark web, or they start to show up in transactions, you can pick them up right away, and they can't go any further in worming their way up through your company. There's no purpose. I usually draw a big triangle, but there's no purpose in protecting the top of the company and then leaving the bottom of the company unprotected, because if I get into the bottom of the company, maybe it'll take a little time, but I can get to the top. I can get to the top of the company. So don't let them get into the bottom of the company, and have identity protection as an employee benefit for your employees. It's good for them. Everyone's going to have it. So you might as well start now. So it'll protect them and it'll protect you. And finally, I like this new emerging technology called angel websites. I like it because I'm an investigator, which is when we can set up a profile of who is interested in you. We can then set up a website that draws those people to us to get to you. And before they get to you, we can figure out who they are. It's an emerging technology. It isn't proven yet. It's been used pretty effectively, as you would imagine, in Israel. And I think that's something that promises to be another solution. But the point that I'm getting at is, and I'll finish with this, I wish I could get up here and give you, one solution. Like there's one solution to cyber theft and cybersecurity. There isn't. And I wish I could get up and give you 5 solutions that equal 100%. And there isn't. But there never has been a 100% solution to crime. And maybe there never will be. But what we have to endeavor to do is the best we can to reduce the infiltrations and the crimes and the threat to our national security. Let's reduce it from 50 or 60% to 90 or 95% chance of success. Maybe we get to 98. And the more we reduce it, the more we can then start using this wonderful, tremendous invention that probably is going to be, equal to the Industrial Revolution in terms of how it's changed our society. We can use it to its maximum effectiveness, as opposed to having to put limitations on it because there's such fear that it's going to be compromised. So thank you very much for listening to me, and thank you very much for giving these ideas to the people who have really done the most to make us, to really have this whole age defined as the age of information. Thank you very much.